The first time I realized I was being gently, deliberately erased from my family's life, I was sitting at the far end of my son's Thanksgiving table, a folding chair wedged so tightly against the buffet I couldn't shift my legs. Clarissa, my daughter-in-law, laughed lightly and said to her friend, "We'll just have the caterers handle it all next year. And a cleaning crew. It's too much otherwise." She said it like I wasn't there. Like I hadn't basted the turkey, chopped the celery, set the table with the linens I brought from my own home. I remember the exact feeling. Not anger. Not hurt. A strange hollowing out. Like something had quietly left the room inside me. But that wasn't the worst of it. That came months later, with an email from my son, subject line, future planning. Just 2 words. But they landed heavier than anything I'd heard at the funeral, or in the long, silent weeks that followed. He'd stopped calling regularly. First weekly, then monthly, then not at all. And now this. No greeting, no warmth. Just a link to a glossy brochure for Cedar Crest Senior Villas and a short note beneath, "Thought you might want to look into this. Also, Thanksgiving is at our place again, 4 p.m. Thursday. Let us know if you can make it. J. Let us know." As though my place wasn't already decided. I stared at that email longer than I care to admit. Not because I was unsure how to respond, but because a part of me was waiting, still, for the rest of it. A sentence that never came. Something softer. More human. Even a simple, "Hope you're doing okay, Mom." But there was nothing. Just a hyperlink, a sterile message, and the absence of everything I used to think was unshakable. I didn't reply right away. I made myself a cup of tea instead. My hands were shaking as I poured the hot water. Not from age. Not from frailty. From restraint. The kind of trembling that comes when you swallow words that want to fight their way out. I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the lake, the wind drawing ghostly fingers across the surface, November trees bare and reaching. I used to love this time of year. The quiet before snow. The hush of things coming undone, but not yet destroyed. Julian used to love it too. He would help me rake the yard, always insisting on jumping into the piles of leaves long after he'd outgrown it. He'd lay there, looking up at the sky, talking about stars and planets and things no one else in the family understood. I had framed pictures, still do, of him at 10, holding up the telescope we rebuilt together. He cried when we finished it. Said it was the best gift he'd ever received. But that boy didn't send me this email. This came from someone else entirely. A version of Julian that had been carefully shaped by Clarissa's chilled hospitality and her exacting ideas of family. I don't hate her. I want to make that clear. I don't even blame her, entirely. But Clarissa is a woman who likes things clean. Controlled. Curated. I was never going to fit that picture. When they bought the house, the one they're in now, I gave them the down payment. Quietly. It wasn't framed as a gift. They called it a shared opportunity at the time, said they'd repay me after Julian's next promotion. I didn't push it. I was just happy to be included. That was 6 years ago. I still have the email thread, though I doubt they remember it. And I certainly don't bring it up. Not anymore. That night, after I read Julian's message again, I walked into the living room and looked at the mantelpiece. My eyes landed on the old brass sextant I'd been restoring. It had belonged to my father, who used it to navigate the Atlantic as a young sailor. He'd taught me how to use it the summer before he died. Said, "Even when you're lost, you can find your way. Just look up." I hadn't touched the sextant in years. But after Russell passed, after the house fell quiet, I'd begun cleaning it. Piece by piece. Not for display. For purpose. I knew what I would do. I pulled out an old mahogany box from the attic. Lined it with deep blue velvet. Set the polished instrument inside. Tucked a note beneath the lid, so you never forget how to find your way home. With all my love, Mom. I wrapped the box in brown paper and tied it with twine. I didn't reply to Julian's email until the next morning. I'll be there, I wrote. Nothing more. No, I won't bring the pie. No, I won't arrive early to help. I had learned, slowly, where the new boundaries were drawn. I wouldn't trip over them again. Thanksgiving Day came cold and gray, the sky over Lake Champlain thick and unmoving. I packed the gift into the passenger seat of my car and began the drive south, away from the woods, away from the quiet. Toward the place I used to think of as an extension of my family. Not anymore. Their street, Oak Haven Estates, was pristine and soulless. A development of identical homes, manicured shrubs, and porches no one ever sat on. I parked at the curb. The last car in a long line of glossy SUVs. My sedan looked like an intruder. The house glowed with light. Laughter trickled out when someone opened the front door to greet a guest. Not me. I waited, watching shadows pass behind the frosted glass. Then I approached. I rang the doorbell. And waited. Nothing. I rang it again. The chime echoed faintly, swallowed by music and conversation. Still, no one came. Just the wind, clawing at my coat and my patience. 10 minutes passed. Finally, the door opened. Julian stood there, expression unreadable. He blinked at me as if I were an unexpected delivery. Mom, he said. We weren't sure you were coming. No hug. No smile. Just those words. I nodded and lifted the package slightly. He didn't reach for it. He stepped aside. I walked into their home, the gift still in my hands, the air thick with pine and clove and something sugary from a candle burning too long. The house was pristine. Cold. Like a page torn from a lifestyle magazine. Clarissa appeared almost immediately. Tall, perfect, and vaguely irritated. There you are, she said. We got so caught up. She took my coat but not the box. Her fingers brushed mine as she turned, already speaking to someone else. The dining room was full. Long tables set with linen and crystal. My name was nowhere in sight. Eventually, I spotted a single acrylic chair pushed to the very end, next to the kitchen door. A seat without ceremony. A placeholder. I sat. No one asked about my drive. No one asked about my health. They chatted about ski trips and wine tastings and their new espresso machine. I sipped water from a glass that smelled faintly of detergent and looked at the box on my lap. I thought about placing it in the center of the table. I thought about saying something. About Julian's telescope, about my father's sextant, about navigation, about love. But I stayed quiet. That was the moment I realized something I'd refused to see. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being rewritten. Faded out. Slowly. Politely. With smiles and forwarded brochures. And I had a choice. I stayed through dinner. I made small talk with a woman beside me, Clarissa's cousin, I think, who seemed more interested in her wine than in anything I said. Julian didn't speak to me again. Clarissa raised a glass at one point and toasted to family and fresh starts, her smile gleaming like the silver place settings. Everyone clinked glasses. I raised mine half a second late, like an echo. The food was beautiful. Roasted root vegetables, brine turkey, a stuffing with figs and pecans that no one asked me about. Clarissa had printed little menus. I kept mine folded on my lap. It had a quote at the bottom, something vaguely inspirational about gratitude. I can't recall the exact words now. only that it felt like a slogan printed on the side of a scented candle. As dessert was being cleared, I leaned down and picked up the wrapped box. The twine had come slightly undone, one end curling like a question. I took that as a sign. I stood up. Not dramatically. Not even with a clink of silverware. I simply stood. Julian noticed. His eyes flicked to mine, unreadable. Then away again. I walked the length of the table, the gift cradled in my hands. "Julian," I said, pausing behind his chair. He turned slowly. I offered him the box. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't take it. Then he did. "This is for you," I said. "Something your grandfather gave me. I thought it was time you had it." He looked down at the paper. Brown. Unadorned. His fingers fumbled with the twine, then stilled. "You didn't need to bring anything," he said. "I know," I replied. "I wasn't asked to." That hung between us longer than I expected. Clarissa's laugh cut through it. She was already talking to someone new. I stepped back and returned to my seat. My knees ached. The acrylic chair creaked. Julian didn't open the package. He placed it under his chair like it was something to be dealt with later. That was the moment something in me, something fragile, finally gave way. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just a quiet recalibration. I didn't belong here anymore. Not really. I was tolerated. Dismissed with subtle grace. After coffee was served, I slipped away. I didn't say goodbye. No one noticed. The drive home was long. The interstate was dark and slick, headlights carving up the night in sharp little slashes. I turned the radio off and drove in silence. My hands felt steady for the first time all day. By the time I reached the cabin, the lake was a mirror again. The wind had died. I stepped inside and exhaled as if I'd been holding my breath since morning. My coat went on the hook. My boots beside the mat. I stood there for a long time, staring at the fireplace. At the empty chair where Russell used to sit, tapping the edge of his newspaper as he read. I made myself tea. When the water boiled, I poured it carefully, then carried the mug to the living room. I sat. I sipped. And I decided. They wanted me to fade away. They had no place for memory or legacy or complicated maternal love. Only managed logistics. Streamlined obligations. So I would go. Not where they planned to send me, but where I chose. I went upstairs and retrieved the folder. The one with Russell's estate paperwork, the deed, the trust. The Spanish villa. The investments. All of it. They didn't know about any of it. They'd assumed I was surviving on his pension and my social security. That the house was a burden. That I needed rescuing. I gathered the documents and laid them out on the kitchen table. Then I opened my laptop. I booked a one-way ticket. Spain. I remembered the photos, white walls, orange trees, a terrace that overlooked the sea. Russell had shown them to me the year before he died. One day, he'd said. "When we're done with all the noise." The noise had outlived him. But not me. I wrote a note. Folded it into an envelope. Left it propped against the kettle. The next morning, I packed only what mattered. My father's pocket compass. Russell's letters. A photograph of Julian when he was still mine. I left the rest. Let Clarissa and Julian come searching later. Let them walk through the cabin and wonder how they had missed it all. The strength. The solitude. The quiet resolve. Let them wonder if I'd ever really needed them as much as they'd assumed. Let them sit with that. I locked the door behind me. And for the first time in years, I felt entirely myself. I didn't cry on the drive home. I think that surprised me more than anything. For years, I'd believed that if the day ever came when Julian looked at me and saw an obligation instead of a mother, I would fall apart. But I didn't. I drove through the dark with the heater humming, my hands steady on the wheel. Not because it didn't hurt. Of course it hurt. But because something inside me had finally snapped into place. There's a kind of clarity that comes when you realize you've been written out of a story you helped build. They weren't trying to hurt me. That was the most bitter part of it. Clarissa with her neutral smiles, Julian with his measured silence, they thought they were being kind. They thought they were handling me delicately, like someone past her usefulness but still deserving of politeness. But I know the difference between kindness and convenience. I walked into my cabin just before midnight. The floorboards creaked with the familiar rhythm of home. I didn't turn on the lights. I moved by instinct, fingertips brushing walls, steps landing exactly where they always had. This place had held me together through Russell's illness, through the empty weeks after his passing, through the strange, quiet hum of grief settling into daily life. I poured myself a small glass of brandy and stood by the window, looking out over the lake. Moonlight spilled across the water like something sacred. I remembered how Julian used to love this view. As a teenager, he'd sit on the dock wrapped in an old wool blanket, scribbling notes in his astronomy journal. He'd call me outside, pointing up at the sky, eager to explain what he'd discovered. "Mom, that's Vega," he said once, his face lit with excitement. "It's part of the summer triangle. You can see it best from up here." I remember the way he looked at me that night. Like I was part of the constellations. Like I belonged up there with the stars. That boy is gone. And the man he became doesn't even know he's lost something. I took the folder from Russell's old desk drawer and laid it out on the kitchen table. The documents were in perfect order. He'd always been meticulous. The deed to the villa in Spain. The account statements. The trust information. Letters he'd written but never mailed, all addressed to me in his familiar looping hand. I ran my fingers over the edges of the pages. There was a letter dated 3 months before he died. He must have known. Even then. "Michelle. If they try to box you in, don't let them. If they tell you it's too much, too late, too far, don't believe them. There is more life waiting for you. Go find it." He'd underlined that last sentence twice. Go find it. At 7 the next morning, I called Connie West. She was Russell's estate attorney, a sharp woman with clipped sentences and eyes like surgical blades. I liked her instantly the first time we met. She didn't do small talk. She did facts. "Michelle," she said when she answered. "I had a feeling I'd hear from you. Is everything still in place?" I asked. "The trust. The villa. The accounts. It's all there," she said. "Exactly as Russell arranged it. Then I'd like to talk about access. I'm ready to use it." A pause. Then, "Good. Come in this afternoon. Bring your passport." I packed a small suitcase, clothes, toiletries, my father's compass, the photograph of Julian holding the telescope on his 10th birthday, and Russell's letters. I walked from room to room, not saying goodbye. That word didn't feel right. It wasn't a farewell. It was a release. I left a single envelope on the mantel. No address, no name. Just a key taped to the inside and a short note. "If you ever remember who I am, this is where I'll be." Then I drove into town and sat in Connie's office, signing papers that unlocked a different version of my life. She handed me a slim envelope with a credit card and a bank PIN. "Russell called this your independence fund," she said with the smallest smile I'd seen from her. I tucked it into my purse. Later, I booked a one-way flight to Madrid. From there, A local train would take me to a coastal village I'd only ever seen in photographs. That night, back at the cabin, I made one last cup of tea and stepped outside onto the porch. The wind off the lake was sharp. I pulled my shawl tighter and watched the sky. It was full of stars. I tried to find Vega. I couldn't. But I remembered exactly where Julian had pointed all those years ago. So I looked anyway. Then I went inside and slept. Not restlessly, not curled into myself like I had since Russell's passing. I slept fully. Deeply. Like someone who had finally stepped out from under a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. The next morning, I left. I didn't tell them. Let them wonder. Let Clarissa come looking through old emails. Let Julian notice the cabin growing quiet, unanswered. Let them realize, slowly, that I wasn't waiting for an invitation anymore. I was already gone. Spain was warmer than I expected. Even in early December, the air was soft with sea salt and the golden hush of late afternoon. The train ride south from Madrid blurred past olive groves and terracotta hillsides. I kept one hand on the handle of my small suitcase and the other resting on my lap, steadying the rhythm of my breath. The station in Marba was nothing more than a low white building with chipped blue shutters and a single platform. The taxi driver who greeted me didn't speak English, but when I handed him the folded piece of paper with the address, he smiled and nodded. "Ah," he said, tapping the paper. "Casa del Norte. North House." I watched the town pass by in slow scenes, a row of laundry swaying like prayer flags, two old men playing chess under an arbor of jasmine, children kicking a ball along a dusty street. It was all slower here. Quieter. As though the clocks ran differently in this corner of the world. The villa sat at the edge of town, half hidden behind a weathered stone wall and an iron gate. Bougainvillea spilled over the top in thick crimson blooms. The garden, though overgrown, still held Russell's vision: lemon trees, a gravel path, a small stone bench facing the sea. A woman waited at the gate. "Senora Lawson?" she asked. I nodded. "Mrs. Rodriguez." She smiled and opened the gate. "Welcome home." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and sun-dried linens. The tiled floor was cool beneath my feet. Light poured in through tall arched windows. A basket of fresh oranges sat on the kitchen counter beside a note written in Spanish. I couldn't read all of it, but I recognized my name and the word Tranquilidad. Peace. That evening, I sat on the terrace with a blanket over my knees and a glass of red wine in my hand. The sea below was a stretch of ink, calm and infinite. Somewhere beyond it was the country I'd left behind, the place where I'd been labeled too much and not enough in the same breath. A problem to be solved. A seat to be reassigned. A life politely managed into irrelevance. I was done with all of that. I opened the notebook I'd brought with me. Blank pages, a gift from Connie. She'd said, "Write it all down. The truth, not the version they tolerate." So I began. I wrote about my father's sextant and the telescope Julian once loved. About Clarissa's cold whisper and the email with the death sentence subject line. About Thanksgiving and folding chairs and menus with inspirational quotes. About the cabinet of casseroles after Russell died and the quiet betrayal of assumptions disguised as concern. I wrote until my hand cramped. And when I was done, I closed the notebook and sat in silence. A few days later, I received an email from Julian. The subject line read, "Checking in." No greeting. Just a short paragraph. "Hi Mom. We noticed you haven't been answering texts. Clarissa and I were hoping to talk about some next steps. Also, we found the box. The gift. It was beautiful. Thank you. Let us know where you are when you get a chance." There was no warmth. Just a puzzled civility. A sense that he was reaching into a space he no longer controlled and couldn't understand why. I didn't reply. 3 days later, a message from Darlene. She'd never bothered to send condolences when Russell died. But now, "Hey, Mom. Just heard from Julian that you're traveling. How exciting. Hope you're somewhere warm." I was wondering, Kathleen's applying for study abroad next semester. Spain, actually. Maybe we could visit. Would love to chat. I smiled. The familiarity of the ask, the practiced pivot from absence to advantage, made it all so clear. I didn't reply to her either. Instead, I walked into town and found a small post office near the church. I bought 3 postcards. One for each of them, Julian, Darlene, and Donald. Each said the same thing. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Take care of yourselves. Mom. No return address. No explanation. Just the truth. Weeks passed. I learned the market days, the names of the shopkeepers, the rhythm of siesta and the bells that rang at noon. I bought a second-hand bike and started riding the coastal path. I joined a book club at the library even though my Spanish was still awkward. The women welcomed me anyway. We laughed more than we read. Every night, I sat on the terrace and watched the sea. Russell had chosen this place for a reason. Not as an escape, but as a return. To himself. To me. To the version of life that moved by intention rather than obligation. I finally understood. One morning, I found a letter in the mailbox with a Vermont postmark. The handwriting was Julian's. Inside was a photograph. The sextant, polished and gleaming, displayed on a shelf in what looked like his home office. Beneath it, a sticky note in Clarissa's angular script. "What is this?" Julian had written nothing on the back. But the silence said more than enough. He'd kept it. He hadn't understood it yet, but he'd kept it. That was enough. That night, I lit a single candle on the terrace and poured 2 glasses of wine. I placed one across from me, on the small table, where Russell would have sat. I lifted my glass. To the stars, I said softly. And the people who taught us to find them. And then I drank. And then I lived. The days blurred into one another in Marba, but not in the way they had back home, where time felt heavy and stagnant. Here, they passed like water over smooth stones. I rose with the sun and walked the garden barefoot when the air was still cool, brushing my fingertips over the lavender Russell had planted, now thick and fragrant. I had begun keeping bees. Just 2 hives at the back of the garden. The man from the bakery helped me set them up. His name was Mateo, and he had the kind of quiet presence that didn't rush to fill silence. We shared morning coffee twice a week, sitting in the shade with the sea blinking behind us. He never asked why I had come here alone. And I never offered. It was enough that he listened when I did speak, and that he remembered how I liked my bread, crusty, but not burnt. It was mid-January when the envelope arrived. No stamp. No handwriting. Just my name, Michelle Lawson, typed in bold font and slid under the door. I turned it over twice before opening it. The paper inside was thick, cream-colored, formal. Legal. You are hereby notified of an intent to contest estate assets. Filed, Chittenden County, Vermont. Petitioner, Julian Lawson. My first instinct was disbelief. Then came the familiar sting, anger, insult, a bone-deep exhaustion I thought I had finally laid to rest. I sat down hard at the kitchen table. The letter was brief, professionally worded. Julian was seeking clarification of ownership and disclosure of international property potentially acquired under joint marital assets. Clarissa's fingerprints were all over it. I read the letter twice, then placed it beside my cup. It didn't shake me the way it might have weeks ago. Because I already knew who they were now. And more importantly, I knew who I was. That afternoon, I walked into town and used the library fax machine to send the letter to Connie West. I called her from the payphone outside. When she answered, her voice was crisp with purpose. "I've already received a copy," she said. "Don't worry, Michelle. You're covered. This won't go far." "I figured as much," I said. "But still, it's a choice, isn't it?" He had to choose to file. She didn't argue. That's why I liked her. "Would you like me to respond formally?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not yet. Let's see if he has the courage to call me first." 2 days passed. Then 5. On the 6th, my phone rang. It was Julian. I didn't answer right away. I watched the screen flash in my hand, counting the seconds. On the 4th ring, I picked up. "Mom." His voice was breathy, like he'd been running. "I didn't know they'd send it directly to you," he said quickly. "It was supposed to go through channels. Through lawyers. Why did you file it at all?" I asked. A pause. Clarissa thought, "Look, we didn't know about the house in Spain. Or the trust. Or any of it. We didn't understand why you left." "I didn't leave," I said. "I was dismissed." He went quiet. I imagined him pacing that spotless kitchen, the island I helped pay for glowing under pendant lights. I imagined Clarissa nearby, listening, guiding his words with a look. "You could have told us," he said. "You could have asked." He sighed. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" Another pause. "We were trying to help you. The senior living option was a way to move me out of the way," I finished. "You had a plan. It didn't include me." "That's fine, Julian. But you don't get to decide what I do with what's mine. I just thought, Dad would have wanted." "Don't," I said. My voice came sharper than I intended. "Don't speak for your father." More silence. Then, "So what now? You can rescind the filing. Or fight me in court. Either way, I'm not coming back." "I didn't say you should." "No," I said. "You didn't say much of anything for a long time." "I'm sorry." It came out quickly. Like something forced through a small opening. I didn't know if he meant it. Still, it was the first apology I'd heard from him in years. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I am done trying to prove I matter to people who only see me when they need something." Clarissa says. "I don't care what Clarissa says." That stunned him. I heard it in his breathing. "You're still my mother. And you're still my son. But that doesn't give you ownership of me. Or what I've built. Or what your father left for me." He didn't reply. "I'll have Connie send a formal response," I said. "And Julian, don't come to Spain. Not now. Maybe someday. But not like this." He said nothing more. Just the click of a disconnected line. I stared at the phone in my hand until the screen dimmed. Then I placed it gently on the table. That night, I had dinner at Mateo's house. His sister was visiting with her children, and the house was filled with the kind of joyful chaos I hadn't felt in years. The kids called me abuela, even though I didn't understand half of what they said. One of the girls braided my hair as we sat on the floor, and when she finished, she kissed my cheek without ceremony. I thought about Kathleen. My granddaughter. The one I used to teach to bake when she was little. The one who used to cry when she had to leave my cabin. I wondered if she still remembered those summers. Or if those memories had been replaced by Clarissa's careful rebranding of our family. After dinner, I walked back to the villa. The air was heavy with orange blossoms and sea mist. The moon followed me home like an old friend. On the porch, I found a letter tucked beneath the doormat. It was from Connie. Inside was a short note. Julian withdrew the petition. No further action needed. Rest easy. CW. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer that held Russell's. Then I opened the windows and let the sea air flood the house. I was not a relic. Not a burden. Not a chapter to be skimmed past. I was a woman who had lived. And who was still, gloriously, not done. February settled over Marba with a hush I'd never known back home. In Vermont, February had always meant brittle cold, gray snowbanks, and aching joints. Here, the days were short but golden, the breeze sweet with salt, and the evenings quiet in the best way, a kind of earned silence, like the town itself exhaled after each sunset. I began writing every morning. Not just letters or journal entries. Stories. Half memory, half invention. Scenes from my childhood, recipes passed down from women who'd never seen a cookbook, the sound of Russell's laugh through an open kitchen window. I didn't care if anyone read them. I just needed to get them down. To take what was mine and pin it to the page before anyone could twist it into something more palatable or convenient. I sent Kathleen a postcard. I didn't include a return address, just a view of the sea and a single sentence, "The stars look different here. Maybe one day you'll see them with me." I didn't expect a reply. But I hoped. Hope is a quiet thing. Not the kind they show in movies, no swelling music or teary speeches. Real hope is smaller, more persistent. It lives under your ribs and refuses to leave, even after you've packed your bags and walked into a new life. It was late one afternoon, the sky overcast but warm, when I heard footsteps in the gravel outside the garden gate. I was pruning rosemary near the back wall, the shears in my gloved hands sticky with sap. At first, I thought it was Matteo dropping off bread early. But then a voice called out, tentative, unsure. "Grandma." I froze. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it. The word sounded out of place here, in this place where no one called me anything but Senora or Michelle. I turned slowly. There she was. Kathleen. Hair darker than I remembered, now shoulder-length and tucked behind her ears. Her face thinner, a little tired, but unmistakably hers. A small suitcase at her feet, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. "I hope it's okay," she said, her voice tight with nerves. I figured it out. The return stamp on the card said Alicante. I thought, if I took the train. I dropped the shears. I walked to her and took her face in both my hands. And for the first time since Russell died, I let myself cry. She stayed for 3 weeks. It wasn't planned. She told her mother she was visiting a friend in Valencia for a university break, and I hadn't asked for more. I didn't want to interrogate the small rebellion that had brought her to my doorstep. I only wanted to know the girl in front of me again. We cooked. I taught her how to make tortilla española. She taught me how to use the camera on my phone properly. We sat in the garden and read aloud to each other in the evenings, her Spanish far better than mine. She asked me questions. Real ones. About Russell. About my life before I was anyone's mother. About what it felt like to leave everything and begin again. One night, we sat on the terrace, sharing a bottle of wine I probably shouldn't have let her drink, and she turned to me suddenly. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Tell you what?" "About what they did. About the house. About everything." I looked at her. Her face was lit by candlelight, eyes wide, earnest. "Because it wasn't your burden," I said. "You're not responsible for your mother's choices." "But I would have listened," she said. "I would have come sooner." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You came when you could," I said. "That's all that matters." The next morning, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, replying to an email from Clarissa. "She's mad," Kathleen said without looking up. "She found out where I went. She says I've violated trust. That I've been manipulated." I smiled without humor. "Of course she does. She wants me home for Easter. Do you want to go?" "I don't know." "You don't have to decide now," I said. "You have time." She bit her lip. "You're not going to come back, are you?" "No," I said gently. "I'm not." Kathleen left the next day. We hugged for a long time at the station. She promised to write. I told her she didn't have to promise anything. Just live well. Be herself. Stay curious. After the train pulled away, I sat on the platform for a while, watching the space where she had been. Later, I found a note under her pillow. "Thank you for showing me what a woman can be when she stops asking permission. I won't forget." I tucked it inside Russell's letter, right beside his words. "Go find it." It took another month for Julian to reach out again. This time it was a letter. Handwritten. No legal stationery. No signatures. Just his voice on the page. "Mom. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About what you didn't say. Clarissa and I, things have been hard. I think I was trying to make my life feel orderly again after Dad. I didn't realize I was erasing you to do it. You were always the map, not the detour. I'm sorry. Truly. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but if someday you feel ready, I'd like to come visit. Just to sit with you. No explanations. No expectations. Just to see you. To remember. Your son. Julian." I didn't respond. Not yet. Some things take longer than a season to forgive. But I kept the letter. And I thought, perhaps, one day, when the sea was calm and the air carried the right kind of weight, I would write back. Or not. Because not every story needs reconciliation. Some just need truth. Some just need peace.